you're going to have problems in your life. Do you think that the Creator didn't have expectations, and if they were unmet, that you could just go about your life and not have a carefree life? Absolutely not. So that is the way that we have to begin to look at these things. But we cannot continue this idea that we're all worshiping the same God. We are not. The question does ultimately come down at the end of the day. It questions our manner of worship. And for us, worship is observable, culture. It goes back to, somebody said it, culture. Culture for us is observable worship. Observable worship. Say that. And you're right, this would take time, but we're on the way. But you can't put the God issue on the back burner, because if our problems are spiritual, we have to confront it with that issue.
All right, thank you so much. Imam Aziz, with your closing statements, response and closing statement.
Well, I think by way of closing, my closing statement, I think earlier on a questioner asked, what is the purpose of life? And my sister said, to worship God, which is rightly so, because that is what, as a Muslim, even from the perspective, from the Quranic perspective, that is what it is. But I just want to add on this and say that yes, worship, like my brother was explaining, if we just limit the understanding of worship in the mosque, in the churches, then we may go wrong. Because we have had a lot of people who are worshippers and yet they commit crimes. You see? And you wonder what kind of worship are they actually worshiping in their various mosques, in their churches. And this is because they don't understand the word worship. If they should understand that worship means the relationship between you and your wife, worship means the relationship between you and your children, your community members, and all this, they would have known that worship cannot be found only in the mosque or in the church. And therefore, I'm saying that let the clergy, or if like men of faith, let us demonstrate this to the other members, that look, we understand what we mean by worship, and therefore we are prepared to lead by example and not by rhetorics. What do I mean by that? You don't go telling people worship God, this, that, but your real character, your relationship with your fellow human being becomes faulty.
Yes.
Then that is not worship. If you are put in charge of state funds that do not involve in corruption, if you are supposed to champion the cause of people, the downtrodden, and all that, make sure that you account for every service rendered. That is worship, as far as we are concerned. Thank
you.
There's a piece of a prayer that says, nous tous ces anges passez-moi, nous tous ces anges passez-moi là, dans Balawido, Aïda Wido, nous tous ces anges. Which says that we're all angels, we're all divine beings, and the angel that is below the waters is me. And so when we look in each other's eyes, when we look in each other's souls, in each other's spirits, we have to recognize that the angel in you is me. And so that idea of angel, I am because you are, is fundamental to achieving that space of balance and equilibrium that we talked about, that space of loving ourselves and one another, that is going to help us renew ourselves and be better, stronger people. But spiritual practice has to be tied into education in that way, the same way I have learned things from being here. I trust that some of you will go back and read something about voodoo and candomblé and other African-based traditions. So there's a process of self-education that is needed. There is a process of fellowship, which we're all engaged in right now. But there's also an issue of policy and activism. Because we started out talking about laws, I want to end with something that speaks to an issue that we face collectively, but has to be tied into our activism as spiritual beings. And that is Article 14 of the Durban Declaration and Program of Action Plan. It's to the victims of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance. Article 14/219 urges states to recognize the particularly severe problems of religious prejudice and intolerance that many people of African descent experience, face, and to implement policies and measures that are designed to prevent and eliminate all such discriminations on the basis of religion and belief, which when combined with certain forms of other discrimination constitutes multiple discriminations. In other words, we ourselves have to understand our own prejudices, acknowledge that, and then we have to force our states, whether that state be Ghana, be it the United States, be it Haiti, Brazil, Canada, wherever we are, we have to make our states enforce the policies that are going to protect our spiritual and cultural and economic rights.
Thank you so much. Chris, you have any closing statements? If you have any. Okay, good.
I'll say this. I know enough to know that I don't know everything. And I want to say a whole lot. But that's not, time doesn't permit that. And I do apologize for any questions that have come forward and we didn't directly answer it. That's why the problems of the panel sometimes, especially when there's points made that you deem to be important as a panelist and you want to address it. But I'll say this to the sister who asked about, well, where can we find roads that can connect us? And I think that's one of the significance of this year, this 400-year return to the continent. I think the continent plays a big role. We have to be in a space where we're free to do those things that we do, to bring our gifts, to bring our abilities, and to help build up what's here and respect for what's here, and to be free to be who we are and to come into a greater connection with our God, not be in such an adversarial space. Because I don't know what it's like in every other country, but I do know what it's like in America for a black person. And then we are just in a very adversarial space. And so I think one of the things that we're gonna find that comes from being here is we will be able to connect and we'll be able to bring what we have and take on what our brothers and sisters have here. And it cannot be done, as I started with when I first introduced myself, is it cannot be done without integrity, cannot be done without respect, cannot be done without honor, cannot be done without care, cannot be done without love. And I think that that's what's going to bring us here. Many of us, some of us in this room probably didn't even think we would be here today. And we are in Ghana.
That's right.
You know, probably was the furthest thought from your mind a week ago, well, not a week ago, a year ago, right? And you're here. And that just goes back to the divine. I can't take the Most High out of anything because I truly believe He's the master orchestrator of everything. And so I believe that this continent is going to play a big role in bringing us together in whatever it is we believe as we start. That it's going to bring us to a space, I'm not saying just exactly how, but I think that that space of freedom, it starts with the land. It starts with the people that are receptive and open to accepting people that have been removed. And I think that us coming back together is going to be, I think Africa plays a huge role. And with that, I'm going to end it because I just think that that's what's going to, it's going to happen some way, somehow. Not to say that everybody's just going to come and live in Africa, that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is Africa's going to play a big role in bringing us to a point where we can come together and be who we are and be free to be who we are.
Thank you so much, Dr.
I think my last statement answers the two questions. The purpose of life and what went wrong. The purpose of life is not just worship, but knowledge and worship. Look at the Quran tells us that before you can worship God, you must know God. Yeah. And the first commandment in the Quran says, read. Read. I mean, seek for knowledge.
That's it.
How were the white men able to rule or to enslave our forefathers? It was because they knew the importance of it. How would you know the importance of something if you don't know the knowledge of it? So if we don't have knowledge, we can make an impact. That is my last statement.
All right, thank you so much. That's brother. So it is not that unusual in our expression of faith on a Sunday morning for somebody to shout. It's not unusual on a Sunday morning for somebody to roll on the ground. But ask me what we do when we get up. We fight. We fight for our neighbors. We fight for our seniors. We fight for our children. Because as it's been stated on this panel more than once, spirituality has something to do with relationships. And so everything, I'll accept that too, everything. And so what does that mean? And I think somebody said it, I think you said it, the word accountability. If we're going to do this, then we're going to have to be accountable to one another. That's right. We're going to have to be willing to fight and support for one another and work with one another. And I think the word integrity has been used and honesty. And I think all those things are necessary when you talk about relationships. But again, I think what we offer to this conversation as the St. Paul Community Baptist Church is we work with 40 institutions, many of which do not believe all that we believe, but we come together because we're coming together for self-interest, we come together for our survival, we come together for our prosperity, and we come together in accountability. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pastor Brother. You're going to close us out.
The question I heard Dr. Bridgman raise was, in my own identity, what do I think I can bring to this conversation? And my identity is Christian. And so I want to answer from that place. I don't know what to do with the presumption that one doesn't know what worship means when one uses the word. It's a presumption we often make. But I'm going to go back to the text I was given for this conversation, which was the Exodus story. We spent a lot of time talking about the Exodus in terms of the Israelites. We've talked less about the commandments given to Moses. But the commandment that God gave Moses was to go and tell the Pharaoh, let my people go. But that's not all. There was a so that. Let my people go so that they may worship me. Worship is not just charismatic exhortation. It does not happen just on the Sabbath or the gathering in a building. Worship is a way of being that is rooted in service and work. And I thought when I said I do it through justice and through relationship and through all the ways of being, that I was clear about an understanding of that. So I'm going to say, in my identity, the way that I see being able to contribute to this is to worship, which is what I was created to do, to serve. If you will give me one act of liberty, one of the things that grieves my heart most is to have even falsely created tension between myself and a sister. I don't believe in it. If I offended you in anything I said, I'm sorry. I want you to know that I love you. And I respect your right to worship and serve however you see fit, as I do everyone on this panel. I needed to say that. Because it matters to me.
Let's clap for that. This is what this is all about. That's a perfect way to end this conversation, this dialogue. Let's give a tremendous round of applause to our all-star panel. Before we get out of here, I want to call upon the leader of the San Luis Prophet Conference, Dr. Ivor Carruthers, to make a final statement here. And then right after that, our bishop will give us the closing prayer to lead.
Hello. Get off the phone and turn the thing. Brother.
My assignment is morphing and changing, but I accept it because we serve a God who says, be forever ready, right?
Yes.
My assignment that I have been given by our brother, to whom we owe debt of gratitude for convening us, is to contribute by a synthesis based on the fact that I have listened with the ears of one who has struggled with what it means to claim one's Pan-African identity. And to do that implies that one picks up and has within oneself a sense of divinity, which means your religion goes with you. We're standing on African soil, and therefore we cannot separate the sacred from the secular. And so with that kind of assumption, what I have heard and what I want to share is first to think about some of the powerful questions that we have been left with, to struggle with, because when we leave here, the real work begins.
Yes.
It's very easy for us to sit here in these rooms, in these environments, and have the kinds of conversations that we are having. The greater challenge is what happens when we leave. So some of what was synthesized as a part of this, what you would call give and take didactic relationship between the audience and our wonderful panelists, has been a set of questions that first began with the notion that we have a problematic by the very fact that we have convened this convening. And the problematic in and of itself begins to define the nature of our diversity and our quest for finding unity within that diversity. And so we've raised the question of what is our responsibility, therefore, for our own condition, and at the same time, what is the implication of God's presence in our life as we have suffered through the travail of the tradition. It's very clear that we come from different villages. And those villages have their own particularity that we bring into every situation. And so this notion of eco-theological and ethno-theological challenges really embed this notion of what it means to live within the sacred earth that God has put us in. And so we keep raising this question of where is God in all of this? But fundamentally, I keep hearing and kept coming back to who are your people? I struggled with, and I'm taking responsibility myself, I struggled with the use of the word I. If we were not to speak I, how would this conversation be different? I struggled with the use of the word we. How do we identify as a we? And so when we talk about God in relationship to peoplehood and I-ness and we-ness, we have to be very careful and tentative in terms of expressing what that means, particularly in a conversation that speaks to interfaith dialogue. Some have said, therefore, that we are suffering from ignorance and betrayal. We're suffering, quite frankly, from forgetfulness. We are suffering from forgetfulness, which is a part of what will therefore be required in terms of reparatory justice. And that begins with us repairing our souls and preparing and responding to the requirement that we repair within ourselves our forgetfulness, which is a sin.